Hello and welcome to another Daily Muppet. It's been a little bit of time in the last video. Sorry for the break. Just been a bit busy with work and things like that come up. And, as I said, I tend to like to do these videos when I know that there's some things to talk about. So I've been trying to look into things and see if I have some good subject matter to go over. Today I was planning to do this video and it's good timing. I waited a little bit longer until just a little bit of more, let me fix this, a little bit more news came out, as especially related to the sale as well, confirming some things that we've been talking about and some positives to look at here. So let's get first into that and talk about the takeover. Then we'll talk about strikers. I want to talk about wingers. I want to talk about goalkeeper, and I want to talk about the midfield. Do a fair bit of talk with regards to transfers and what could be happening. So first, as it regards to the takeover, obviously this last week and this week we've been looking at, whether the talks that are moving forward with potential takeover candidates coming in to Manchester to meet with Rain Group, look at the stadium, go over things, all of that. And generally speaking, we've just been waiting to see what would come out of it. We got over the weekend, was it? Maybe last week, or was it Monday? Gosh, I can't remember. I apologize. I think it was maybe Monday. Stories from Ineos, Sunday Times. It was the Sunday Times because it was Duncan Castles. Stories from Ineos about hiring, looking to rebuild the sporting department, things like that. Confirming some information. I put in a video on January 31st about that. But regardless, the big news of today is that, Sheikh Jassim and the Qatar Group are coming in on Thursday, and Ineos on Friday. Telegraph are reporting that there's as many as 8 groups that are in talks with United. Now, not all of those are about actual takeovers. There's going to be groups regarding financing, things like that. We know Elliott, Oak Tree Capital, etc. But then there are 4 groups interested in a full takeover. Now, no matter what way you slice it, this is good news. There's been some reports about the timeline being pushed back and things like that, but the fact of the matter is the more groups involved, the better. And I think there's a reality that Glazers are being faced with that nobody's going to pay the kind of price that they're talking about, $6 billion, $6.5 billion, something like that. It's not going to happen, most likely. And they have to sell. We've talked about this a lot. They have to sell. And the report says they're determined to sell at the right price. And this is what I've heard all along. This is what I've maintained all along. They have to sell. The outcome is going to be a sale, strongly, 90% at this stage. And it's continuing on. And the more bidders, the better. In terms of who those other groups are, strongly believe one to be Pagliuca, related to Pagliuca. I have maintained that for a bit. I very strongly believe that to be the case. So we will see. It may or may not come out anytime soon. But I strongly believe it to be Pagliuca, the third one of the parties of the 4 that are involved. But what's going to happen now, just again to clear up the process, they're going to have these meetings. They've already had meetings with a bunch of people. Meetings on Thursday, meetings on Friday, meetings with somebody else next week. And then following that, they're going to be making more detailed bid proposals in the next 7 to 10 days. And then the Glazers, before the end of the month, are expected to move forward with and select their bidder to move into exclusivity with. That is the expectation. That is how things should go. And that is what we're expecting at this point in time. So we wouldn't have seen actual bids. So don't get hung up on the details of things, as we wouldn't have seen actual bids as of yet. I've mentioned this before. We will only start to see actual bids in the next 7 to 10 days, and we may not know exactly what they are. I imagine these are going to be a pretty heavily under lock and key, so we may not hear anything until it says XYZ is moving into exclusivity, or it could even be they decide 2 bidders move into that and they have to play them against each other. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think they'll pick the one. But regardless, it's moving forward, and we should expect this sale does get done. I still strongly hear that. I still believe that's exactly what's going to happen, and that the Glazers cannot hold on. And all the news, the solid news that keeps coming out, continues on. As I've said before, the talk about they don't really want to sell, not really true. It's all about the game. It's all about the game. It's all about it. I'm happy. At this stage, obviously, I've said a lot of things about the takeover in general. At this stage in time, my priority is that the takeover occurs. That's really all I'll say and care about it. I can have personal opinions, preferences, things like that. It doesn't really matter. My preference is that the club gets sold and that the takeover occurs. That's what I want. That's what I want to happen. That's all I really care about. I think that's mostly what matters and is more important than anything else. So it's looking likely. So let's move on then to transfers, because if this happens the way that it should and we move into summer, really need to address certain things. The league form for United is pretty bad recently. 3 wins out of 9 or something like that. 1.5 points per game, I think. It needs to be better than that to secure top 4. The current form is not going to be enough to secure top 4, and what was looking like an easy lockup is now getting dragged back into a bit of a dogfight, which is not helped by Casemiro having a red card and being banned for the next 3 Premier League games, including Newcastle. It's an issue. United, I think, of the 13 remaining games. Anyway, they need to win like 8. And it's got to get better. We've got to get above 50% win percentage back in the league, get that going again. Champions League, missing out on Champions League would be somewhat disastrous. But let's talk about strikers. I am 100% that this is far and away the most needed position at Manchester United right now. I've maintained it a number of times. I continue to maintain it. I continue to believe it. And there's been a lot of talk of strikers recently. So obviously there's a lot of talk of Harry Kane, Osimhen, Ramos, Vlahovic, these types of players. Now, as I said before, my understanding is that Harry Kane is extremely unlikely. The club know it. They expect Tottenham to do whatever they can to keep him. That's the expectation. And that is what is going to happen. But it is pushing United to look to the other names, regardless of what they want from Harry Kane. I would also add that there's been a whole restructure in the hiring of data analysts, things like that. And transfers are perhaps going to be done a bit differently this summer. So it may be that some of the information I'm reporting out there is funny, because you saw a lot of reports about Harry Kane, and then from the other side, it was like, no, we're not selling Harry Kane to Manchester United at all. It's not happening. And then the reports started to come out, oh, maybe United are going to look at someone other than Harry Kane. That's been the case. That's been the case all along. I think I've said that on Saturday. Then Ornstein came out with his report about it, and then there's a couple in the last few days from Sky saying they don't want to get dragged into it. Mark Ogden, ESPN. They don't want to get dragged into the thing with Kane. That's the issue. So they're looking at their targets. So I just wanted to have some fun with this and show some of the players in comparison to each other and to other strikers in the Premier League in terms of stats and things like that. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not necessarily judging players based purely on stats. It can be misleading and all of that, but, they're fun things to look at. So let's talk about some strikers. This is Harry Kane versus Victor Osimhen on a radial graph with their statistics. Now, these numbers are percentile rankings, okay? That is not like it's per 90, but it's percentile rank of these things for strikers in the top 5 leagues. So, for instance, when it says 96 shots, it means 96th percentile for shots. So Victor Osimhen would be in the blue, Harry Kane in the red. And what Osimhen is doing here is very impressive. XG, goals, shots, all way up there. Touches low, bit more of a traditional 9 in the box, sitting there, getting on the end of things, getting on the end of the play rather than dropping deep and getting involved. But that just makes all of this much more impressive. His XG chain is high, and this simply means that basically based on his touches and possession and all that, he's involved in a large portion of XG, which makes sense. It means he's usually the one finishing the chances. A lot of non-penalty XG per shot. He shoots from really close range, gets in the right spots, has actually a lot of assists, interestingly enough, even though he makes fewer key passes. He receives the ball in the most threatening areas, like 98th percentile. He receives the ball in extremely dangerous areas. Shot conversion is near even. Harry Kane is a little better on goals to XG. Anyway, point being, when you look at it overall, what can you conclude from this? Victor Osimhen is doing fantastic, and the only thing he doesn't do as much as Harry Kane is drop deeper, drive the ball into the box and things like that. But he's very dangerous, very much a prototypical 9 in a lot of ways, an elite, finisher, an elite player at getting into the right positions and scoring goals. There we go. I'm comparing here Darwin Nunez because, a lot of people, it's very funny because I'm going to talk about Antony in a little bit too. A lot of people at the start of the season thought that Darwin Nunez would end up being really bad. And as you can see, as the season's gone on, he's been quite important for Liverpool and a very good striker. Very physical. When you look at his numbers, he's impressive. He's very productive. Not as productive. He's doing almost everything where Darwin Nunez is failing is his finishing, which is over here on the right, goals, XG, and shot conversions. His conversions are bad. Otherwise, he's very creative, very good at getting into the box, very good at getting in position. Osimhen you'd think would be better, but it comes down to finishing. And that's where Darwin Nunez is failing and where Victor Osimhen is a very good striker this year. Ivan Toney, I wanted to compare as well because, obviously I'm not going to buy him with the whole ban. A lot of people have really liked Ivan Toney's fit. Good player. A lot of goals, a lot of scoring. However, it doesn't really get into as many dangerous areas. Isn't really dribbling much. Isn't really doing that. Good scorer. Isn't totally doing as much, but is a very good player. I mean, a really, really good player. Recoveries in the opposition half, that's one I'd like to note because that's about pressing. So if I go back, you can see Osimhen is in the 51st percentile, so he's right about average in terms of pressing, better than Harry Kane, better than Darwin Nunez, although it's not adjusted for possession here. Ivan Toney, very good presser. So Ivan Toney would be, honestly, outside of the big names, if there wasn't the ban situation, Ivan Toney, I would be looking at him. And then here's Vlahovic. I wanted to compare because Vlahovic is name a lot of say, and he's a good player, but I think he's, based on the numbers, he's pretty mid. I mean, good, above average, good, decent goals, decent XG, decent shots. Finishing is okay. Take-on's not so great. Positioning is decent. He's a good player, not great. I think a good fallback option, but not a great striker. Okay, aerial duel percentage is kind of low. Not great. And then I have Wout Weghorst here. And I'm not trying to do this to be mean, but this just shows how badly we're missing a striker and why striker has to be the number one priority. I mean, take a look at this. Look at these percentiles for Weghorst. It switches here where Osimhen is in the red. Look at this. 13, 11, 14, 29, 11, 15, 30. I mean, it is really, really poor in terms of striker play. Whereas Weghorst good, he's been actually decently creative. Key passes is good. And he's been an amazing presser. Recoveries in the opposition half and adjusted production. He's one of the best pressers in the world. But in terms of everything else, we are not getting striker play out of Wout Weghorst. That's just the fact of it. I mean, he hasn't been playing in that position every game either, but we're just not getting production in terms of the scoring. And you can see the massive, massive hole that leaves. And then I have Erling Haaland here, who is probably the best pure number 9 in the world. He's in the red and Osimhen in the blue, and you can see it's very comparable. They're really, 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 really similar. Osimhen creates a little bit more, presses better. They both have very, very few touches. That's why I made the comparison. Where is Erling Haaland better? He's probably just the best finisher in the world. That's all there is to it. His goals to XG and shot conversions are out of this world. But otherwise, Victor Osimhen is probably the most similar player to Erling Haaland that there is. And that's what I think Manchester United need. And I think would make the biggest difference. So that is Victor Osimhen. That is what I think in terms of striker. I have on, I couldn't put Gonzalo Ramos up there. From the stats that I could gather, though, to make the comparison, Gonzalo Ramos holds up pretty well to Victor Osimhen. And between the two of them, the decision I would make it based on is when I watch the two of them play, Victor Osimhen is a much better athlete. And my personal preference at this stage in time is to get an elite athlete at striker, get the best, most physical, athletic player at striker, because I think it makes the transition to the Premier League much easier. Gonzalo Ramos is not a slouch or anything like that. I really like Gonzalo Ramos. I'd be very happy if we signed Gonzalo Ramos, but Victor Osimhen is just, in my opinion, better. Faster, stronger, etc. Stat-wise, they're pretty similar, though. Interestingly, Osimhen actually creates more than Gonzalo Ramos statistically, believe it or not. But they're very similar in terms of finishing and things like that. So I think that's where the most of the money's going to go to. And when you're talking about the money for Kane, you might as well move on to Osimhen and Ramos. And 100 to 120 million, I think, is what it's going to take. And they should spend it. At this point in time, get the best player available. And especially at striker, I think it's proving why you need somebody for that. So now I want to talk about wingers. And, people are going to call me a hater on this and all of that. But we really have to talk about Antony. I don't think we're going to sign wingers this summer, but we really got to talk about Antony because, an article came out from The Athletic as well detailing his really poor play. I've been real unhappy with his play, and it's not about hating on him. I'm going to show some comparisons and examples of some of the problems that I have with Antony and pictures and things to show it. Again, not tooting my own horn, but last summer when we were talking about this, there was a lot of people commenting saying, Darwin Nunez is crap, get Antony, better target. And I was saying, look, I think Antony's a good player, but he's a 30 million winger. He's not a 100 million winger. And I don't want to hold the price against him, but he's got to do a lot more because the problem with the price is not the player. The problem is you can't spend when you've spent 80 to 100 on a position. It's going to stop you from getting more players. So let's look at a few things in comparison here to Antony. I want to show to Jadon Sancho, and this is one of the kind of beefs that I have. Jadon Sancho this season is being derided as pretty much a failure. Doesn't play much, doesn't get on the pitch, but when you compare their stats, and Sancho presses better, Sancho creates more threat, similar touches, more goals, more assists, passes to the box are way higher, box entries way higher, shot creating actions way higher, take-ons attempted way higher, recoveries in the opposition half way higher, XG higher, XA higher, threat generated higher. Jadon Sancho, by the numbers, is still actually quite an elite creator. We have no striker. Again, I point this out. We have no striker, but he's still creating chances for others, creating for Rashford, creating for Bruno, creating for Weghorst. When he comes on the pitch, he creates, and even if you can't always see it, he's doing it. A lot of the actions he makes are extremely productive. Now, where is Antony better? Carrying distance and progressive distance. What is Antony doing? He's getting the ball deeper and driving it up the pitch. That's it. That's the only thing he does. And I think this was outlined in The Athletic was the problem. He's good at one thing, getting himself to his position, which is on the right wing, and then he does nothing. He does nothing after that. There's nothing that happens after that beyond the random goal. I think at an 8 or 9% conversion rate now in comparison, you have Marcus Rashford, and the strikers we've been talking about, they're up in the 20s in terms of conversion rate. It's got to be better. This isn't enough. And the fact is, Jadon Sancho should be playing more. He needs to play more. I understand the balance of the left-footed right winger, but it's so unproductive at this point. It's kind of ugly. Even comparing Alejandro Garnacho, fortunately injured right now, when you look at all of this, Garnacho's better in XG chain, better with assists, better with goals, progressing the ball as well in terms of actions, more box entries, more XG, more XA, similar threat generated, similar pressing. Garnacho's doing incredible, actually. I mean, obviously he needs improvement in a lot of areas, but he's very direct when he gets on the ball. He's a threat for goals and assists. He's just, again, where's Antony winning and progressing it from deeper and getting it towards the final third? It's not enough. And I want to talk about those transition moments too in a minute. I think I have another comparison here. Here's another winger, Kulusevski at Tottenham, just in comparison to a player not on our team. And you can see the difference. Kulusevski in blue here, just vastly more productive. Vastly more productive. and it needs to be sorted out. But I want to give some examples. This is in the Southampton game. This came in the fifth minute. If you look here, you have Antony. I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger while I'm explaining it, because I think it's worth being able to see this a little bit more now. Let me make this bigger to not cover my face. Okay. You have Antony here, and look, you have 5 forwards across that line, and you have essentially 3 defenders. He's got a 2-on-1 with Wan-Bissaka here. You've got 2 men free on the left side who are not being covered because the middle defender is covering Jadon Sancho's run, and the other player behind Jadon Sancho is coming across to chase Wan-Bissaka, but miles behind him. What would you do in this situation? This is a transition moment. What would you do when you look at it? What's the obvious answer? Cut inside, pass it over the top or on the ground to Weghorst or Rashford running free on the other side. The pass to Wan-Bissaka is not a bad one here if you make it, but it's got to send him inside. You got to move centrally, send him inside so he can get on net or pass it across. What happens? He doesn't really move any more central. If you look at his starting spot to ending spot, basically the same. The pass to Wan-Bissaka is really wide. Now look at how open Weghorst and Rashford are in this situation. They would have stayed that open because that player moved out of the way because he's been chasing Wan-Bissaka the whole time. Wan-Bissaka's run is essentially the feint here. Weghorst has his hands up, rightly so. Rashford's running behind him. It's a goal. That should be a goal right here, or at least working the keeper. Goes to Wan-Bissaka. The pass is pretty bad too. By the time Wan-Bissaka gets to it, if you notice, it goes from a 5-on-3 to Wan-Bissaka now in a 1 versus 3 position. 2 players blocking the cross back in, and the goalkeeper at a tough angle for where he gets it. Essentially in transition, the stats where he's bringing the ball up, where he gets all those carrying stats, the decision-making is awful. He does not drive the ball at pace. He could drive it down the line himself. He could cut inside and drive it towards the goal, but instead slows the play up, makes the pass way too early to a bad location that sends Wan-Bissaka wide. This should be a goal. You can even see still here, the 2 left wingers are totally free, Weghorst and Rashford, if he had just kept the ball. He's got them free in the box for a goal, 100%. These are the goals we have to be able to score. Another situation, you can see here even more so on this line, how far Weghorst and Rashford are free on that side, and that pass across should be a bread and butter for a left-footed right winger. Moving on to a different one at the 26th minute, he receives the ball from Luke Shaw here in a massive amount of space, not that far off of the goal. Come on. You've got essentially a 3-on-3, you're fast, but that defender is practically jogging. And why? Because you know that Antony's not going to drive it towards the box, and he's not going to drive to the byline and or to the touchline and send it in, which is exactly what he should do. He should try for pace here. He should try to get by him. You should drive it into the box. But what happens instead? Slows down, cuts it back, a 3-on-3 turns into, again, a 1v3. And these are the situations that Antony is really struggling in. And I get it. You want to be a possession player. You want to be a possession team. You still have to score goals in transition. Transition are still going to give you some of your best moments. That second scenario came after beating a really high Southampton press, which is why there was so much space. And when you're playing teams that press you, when you're playing possession, if you can't score in transition, then you're in trouble. If you get really good at possession, you force teams to come out instead of a low block, and then you have to start scoring in transition to push them back. You have to be able to score in transition without being a transition team. You still have to. And those 2 chances should have resulted in at least goals or shots on target, and neither one did in that instance. Those were 2 good opportunities before the red card. United should be leading at 4 minutes. That's the fact of it. It's got to do a lot better. The decision-making is really poor. It is very poor. I don't think United are going to buy a winger, but it needs improvement. And we need to see something from somebody else if he's not going to be able to produce that at this point in time, be it Sancho on the right, Bruno on the right. I really don't care. Somebody's got to be up there producing because it's really, really hurting the team at this point in time in terms of the goal-scoring opportunities. Moving on to goalkeeper, again, reports today that Diogo Costa is being scouted again by United. Talk about Raya and Costa. We know that David De Gea is likely to be offered a reduced terms contract. It's still a priority, still a huge part of possibly playing out the back and a necessity. So something still to keep in mind. I do believe a goalkeeper will be on the list this summer, but obviously, as we went over in the chart, Dean Henderson has to be sorted out. In terms of the midfield, very complicated. I don't know what's going to happen, honestly, because I don't believe that Jude Bellingham, Frankie de Jong are options. Then you have all the other players that we've talked about, like, Casemiro. Forgot. Zubimendi, Rice, these players, Sabitzer. It's up in the air right now. We're going to have to see what happens. And once we see what happens, once we see where it goes, then it's going to be based on these other things. It's going to be based on outs with McTominay, with Van de Beek. I think they are not sure what and where they're going to go, and that's why you're seeing a lot of names pop up. So as of right now, the big priority is striker and the takeover. If the takeover occurs as it should, they get the money spent on the striker. They're going to be working on these other targets of goalkeeper and midfield, but you're likely going to see midfield addressed afterwards, as these other things are just having to be the priority at the moment. In terms of the fit, I don't know. If you're not getting a De Jong, if you're not getting a Bellingham, I think Declan Rice is the best player to get in there. But, Arsenal are heavily invested in going for him. You've got the other targets. You've got some other names listed, but I think at the moment, that is probably the most influx position where it's unknown who they could bring in, and really going to be based on striker spending, as well as what happens in terms of moving players on, like McTominay, Donny Van de Beek, etc. Okay, so that's what I've got for today. That's my talk. Let me know your thoughts about the striker situation and who you would prefer. Let me know what you think about the winger thing and the takeover, all of that. And I'll definitely try to keep doing some more updates regularly as we get some further information on transfers, which we will, moving into, especially towards the international break. Often a lot of work gets done then. Okay, thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on, and I will see you in the next video.